appreciation for Fabergé is truly international. You can appreciate the flowers as true works of art, even if Fabergé isn't your chosen collecting field. They stand out as masterpieces across the decorative arts.
Sotheby's is the temporary custodian of some of the world's most rare, remarkable, and coveted art and objects. In each episode, we'll be exploring the significance and journey of an extraordinary work told by those who know it best. This is The Specialist. On today's episode, the beauty of nature suspended for eternity. Helen Culver-Smith reveals how the digital discovery of an apple blossom study rendered in gold, enamel and rock crystal by master maker Fabergé led her down a fascinating path of provenance, all the way to Imperial Russia. Helen is Sotheby's head of decorative arts worldwide and head of Fabergé and Russian works of art. Let's join Helen now with more.
The history of the House of Fabergé is a really interesting one because the Fabergé we know is the son of a jeweler who actually established Fabergé in the first instance. And he was a Frenchman, and he came and he set up his jewelry business in Russia. Carl Fabergé, who ultimately makes that business so famous, was his son. And when he was training, he decided he wanted to do the Grand Tour. And so in doing so, he went to all the great centers of production across Europe to learn their techniques, and then came back to his father's business and began to produce things in a really unique and interesting manner. The emperor, Alexander III, recognized how skillful this individual was. And once Fabergé had the patronage of the emperor, that is when he truly was able to fly. Fabergé made many, many more things than the imperial eggs. In Fabergé's flower studies, we discover all the things that made Fabergé the greatest jeweler in the age of great jewelers, the magic that he imbued simple objects. The flowers were wonderful harbingers of spring in a country that was quite cold for most of the year. They were really to capture nature and bring it into your home as wonderful reminders of the spring to come. And this is where Fabergé was such a genius. He had workshops under his kind of overarching quality control. And each workshop would have been part of the production of this flower. So you have a lapidary that would have carved these incredible wafer thin leaves that curl in different directions. Then you would have the enamelers. So this is a very complicated, labor-intensive process of firing and refiring this object to get its colors. And you see the enamel on the petals of the object, and it ranges from a beautiful pink through to a kind of opalescent white. Each of the flowers is then set with a diamond and is mounted on a gold stem. So that's another workshop. And then the study, of course, sits in what is really, truly magically a rock crystal vase. There's also an illusion that it's full of water. So it creates this beautiful illusion of a flower study. The extraordinary thing about the flower studies, and this one in particular, is that only 80 survived. It compares most closely to 2 that are in the Royal Collection in terms of its size, because this is an extraordinarily large example. This is the only apple blossom that we know. You can feel the weight of the flowers, and you can also see on the gold stem that there might be buds coming. You're looking at the natural process, and Fabergé has kind of encapsulated it, crystallized it in precious materials. It is quite exceptional for a flower to come onto the market because notably a large portion are in the Royal Collection. Fabergé completely ceases production with the revolution in 1917. And then obviously these objects were dispersed and with them their magic. So it is a real treasure hunt to find them. This showed up on Sotheby's valuation portal. And the portal that we have is a wonderful democratic tool, and absolutely anybody can send something that they think is valuable and get it in front of our eyes. So this was somebody who had submitted this online. My chin hit my desk because 99% of what shows up on our valuation portal, or what exists in the world of Fabergé generally, are fake. And immediately I turned to my colleague and I said, that is a Fabergé flower. I can't guarantee it because we need to see it, we need to handle it. But I think after years of being in this field, I have gained an ability to kind of see an object and sense it. And for Fabergé, it's incredibly difficult, especially when objects aren't hallmarked. So it's recognizing those telltale characteristics. And for Fabergé, that's really the quality. The way that the flower sits in the vase, for example, it's the balance of the object as an overall object. And then when looking closer, is there that detail in the enameling? Do you see the layers of color? Because when I see fake Fabergé flowers, you just wouldn't have the individual variety and that attention to detail. The second way that an object is tempting is a hint of the provenance. The object was also housed in a case that was labeled for Wartski, who are very prominent dealers in Fabergé and have been for many years. And so obviously you have your first impression, gosh, this looks fascinating. Then in looking further into the provenance that the client had provided, the flower had originally been purchased in 1973 by a woman named Chiquita Astor, who had married the youngest son of Nancy Astor. She had purchased this from Wartski, having divorced her husband, and I think maybe treating herself to a beautiful object. That was the family's provenance. In the box, there was also a note that this had previously been in the collection of Martha Baird Rockefeller, the wife of John D. Rockefeller. So we're hopping from an amazing British provenance to an amazing American provenance. She was also a great collector, and her collection was sold in a series of 3 sales at Park Bernay, which then became Sotheby's. It was a bit of a homecoming for the flower, but this was not included in those 3 sales. So I believe at the same time as those sales were occurring, the flower must have passed directly into Wartski's control, from whom it was acquired by Chiquita. So that was the provenance we knew, but then we were able to add an incredible layer of provenance, because one thing about Fabergé objects, and this doesn't happen all the time, but one amazing thing about them is that Fabergé kept their own records and their own stock numbers. In this case, we had a number etched on the bottom of the rock crystal, which is very rare. When we researched it in St. Petersburg in the archives, we found out that this number corresponded to a 4-way purchase, and all 4 of them happened to be the children of Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna, known as the grandest of Grand Duchesses. She was famous for her incredible jewelry collection. She was also incredibly fond of flower studies, and this particular one appears to have been a gift from 4 of her children. The ledgers showed us that there were 4 individuals paying 200 rubles each, to a mighty sum of 800 rubles for this object. The average Fabergé flower would cost anywhere between 200 and 300 rubles. It was an extraordinary sum to spend on what was a very rare and beautiful object. I think what's extraordinary about this object, and as we discovered the different layers of the provenance, is the enduring nature of Fabergé, of the allure, and how many different lives it has lived and different markets. If you think about the beginning of its journey, where it was an opulent present for one of the most ostentatious members of the imperial family, then I think after that we see the importance of the relationship that American money had to acquiring many of these objects. So the Soviet government and notable individuals had to sell objects off after the Revolutionary War, and many of those objects ended up being sold in America. So you do have a whole segment of the Fabergé market that was comprised of really important American collectors. So that's where we see Rockefeller fitting in. Then I think when you see Chiquita Astor and the kind of society aspect in the United Kingdom, the allure of Fabergé continued to be the fact that it was a place, especially in London, because there was a London branch, that you weren't just going to buy something, but you were going to see and be seen, because the king and queen loved it so much. All of Edwardian society, who was hoping to curry favor with the royal family, would parade through Fabergé, acquiring something in hopes that this gift would get them the invite or the right placement at the next important supper. So I think you can kind of see that continued interest in what was really this glittering age of glamour. And Fabergé still echoes that. It's Imperial Russian glamour, it's American glamour, and then it's British glamour. The auction was in 2021. And then the owner, who was a descendant of Chiquita Astor, she gave us the time and the space to research it. The Fabergé world is a fascinating one because it's unlike a lot of fine art. We do not have a lot of the time that kind of external stamp of approval. It's on my shoulders to authenticate and to then guarantee an object. And so the run up to the auction involved me doing my own research, working with somebody in St. Petersburg to find those original invoices. So in advance of the auction, we placed an estimate of 150 to 250,000 pounds on this flower, which honestly, that is supported by the handful of objects that have come up on the market. I could tell there was quite a lot of interest in advance of the auction that ended up making 327,600 pounds on the day. And there was an international bidding war for this flower. And then it went into quite a wonderful collection that isn't necessarily a Fabergé collection. How extraordinary to have something, a real treasure, a real masterpiece, come to you in such an unexpected way, then to dig deeper and deeper, be able to find archival documents related to it, and then to actually have the object standing that had passed through all of those hands. That's why, honestly, I have become a specialist in objects, because they do travel and they do carry with them the story of each of those different contexts. And it's in a new context now. The story continues, the chain continues.
Thank you for joining us on The Specialist. This has been brought to you by Sotheby's Financial Services. SFS offers asset-based loans to unlock the value of your fine art, automobiles, and other luxury collectibles. To step further into the world of Sotheby's, visit any one of our galleries, which are open to the public. Go to sotheby's.com to find out more.